downtown Birmingham, Alabama, and talking to you from my cute little tiny haunted house near Pensacola, Florida. And I'm here to welcome you. Thank you so much for joining me here tonight on my show. And tonight, anyone that is new to what I do, I am the Fat Psychic, and I do a little bit of everything. I've been a psychic or working in the field as a psychic for 44 years. I'm 62 years old. I was murdered 32 years ago, came back from that, and that helped with my psychic experiences. The hiccups are going to get me. and so uh, I have been doing this for it seems like a couple of years. And Kat Hobson produces the show. So anyone that's coming in, uh, we are. I talk anything metaphysical that I like. I like ghosts. And if you've seen any of my radio shows, seen them? If you've heard my radio shows, uh, I do a lot of ghost stories. I've done a lot of books like Chattanooga Chills 1, 2, 3. Um, the, oh goodness, Web of Terror, and with Sin Schrader and Hill, and I've been in some of Teal Gray's books, the Shades of Angel, Scared Senseless. So we've had a lot of fun. And so right now I'm working on a book called My Mean Old Grandma's Good Old Cookbook. And she was a great cook, terrible person, but great cook. And off of that, I will be doing a a cooking show, cooking things that she would have done, and also things from my own collection because I've been collecting since '96, I think, 1996, when I got really interested in it. So I'm a cooking psychic. I'm an eating psychic. That's why I'm fat. So we'll have fun tonight, and we are having a little technical difficulties and stuff. But it's okay. We'll be in here, and I will carry us our full 2 hours, hiccups and all. Now, tonight, what I'm going to talk, like I said, if you're new to the show, I like to talk ghosts. I like to talk hauntings, haunted buildings. Uh, I talk alien stuff, Anunnaki stuff, from the Sumerian record kind of aspect, the Zechariah Sitchin kind of thing. And I talk just about anything. So, and you never can tell what I'm going to hit. Well, what we're going to talk about tonight, since I had a good response to people enjoying seeing my little haunted doll, Lizzie, uh, I've got a couple of extra dolls here with me tonight that are haunted. I've got a haunted quilt. I've got a fragment of a dress from Mary Todd Lincoln, which I'm a channeler. So at some point I will do a recorded channeling of Mary Todd Lincoln. And we will discuss her and her spiritualist roots and the things. I mean, she brought seances to the White House, girls and boys. And I have a couple of other things. I think I'm just gonna kind of do show and tell, my haunted show and tell. And the second part, I'll do the Mary Todd Lincoln, and uh, we will cover the other things first. But I got a fascination with ghosts and all that from my family because my grandmother was a very, very, very good psychic. My mother's mother, not the main one. And my mother was psychic. She didn't like to accept it because they were fascinated, but they were weirded out by it because they were Baptists, or my mother was Baptist, and so it was a very strange thing. They didn't look at it as a gift from God, I guess, always. But it was different when her mother did it. When I would do it, then it's like, her sisters would be going, "He's a devil worshiper. He's dead people." And it's like, not quite, not quite. But I got fascinated with it. My grandmother, Laura, Granny, she was very psychic, and her stories really impressed me. And actually, in my books, I use those as the cornerstone for what I built on. Because she had a lot of she was a Victorian, so she had a lot of Victorian ghost stories and experiences, and just amazing. So it was something I really loved. Um, and then with my mother, she would exhibit periods of psychic ability without quite knowing she was doing it, and then afterwards she'd go, "Ooh." Um, and they collected a lot of things that were haunted, whether they wanted to keep them or not. Like the chair my grandmother Laura died in, Granny died in, and her and her sisters would fight over the chair my granny died in. So when my mother went, my brother got rid of it, and I didn't really want it. I don't know. I think it's because of I love a haunted thing, but an haunted item, especially that. But the sisters and all the brouhaha that went with it made it where I didn't want that. But about a year before my mother passed, she kept that chair next to her bed, and she called me all freaked out because the chair slid about a foot to the side of her bed, and she could smell roses. And I said, "Well, that's not a bad thing." And not very long after that, her oldest sister died. They had all sorts of other things. My cousin has a picture of my grandfather. See, my granny did that with my mother. For my aunt Betty, no, she had a picture of my grandfather, a little portrait from when he was 6 years old. Well, excuse me, toddler. And he had long sausage curls. It was in the era when they were dressing boys like little girls, because a lot of little boys would get kidnapped and shanghaied and taken to factories. So they started dressing little boys like little girls, so they wouldn't be kidnapped. And he was the least feminine little boy I ever heard of. But she had this painting of him, and it jumped off the wall and was in the middle of the room facing her, waiting for her. When she came into the room, and she freaked out and had my mother come up there, and it wasn't too long before she died. So I come from a family where we had that kind of thing going on. Just we accepted it. A lot of them had haunted houses and stuff. Whatever it is in our genetic makeup, we're just ghost magnets. And they liked my Aunt Becky, liked ghosts and stuff, and they had a house that, excuse me, the hiccups are getting me, that I, I worked in for a while because I wanted to come see this. It was haunted, haunted. And she had this house, and they wanted to move to a place called Spring City. So they rented out their house to a what do you call it? I mean, a company that rented out. And then when they a couple of years later came back, they came back to the house themselves and quit renting it out. And during the time they were gone, a lady had rented the house that she was a self-styled witch, apparently, or some kind of witch. There's plenty of witches and stuff that are not a problem, but she had the attic room draped in black. She had rocks up there. She had all this stuff, and there were cats and stuff missing from the neighborhoods, and she was scaring the neighbors and threatening to put spells on them, and they basically chased her off because she was threatening the neighbors. Well, when my aunt moved back in, the house was haunted, beyond haunted, and the attic room that she used for her ceremony room was Ghost Central. And so she was always telling stories about these figures running through the house. There was a ghost named Gertrude, and they called her Gertrude. And I know Lori out there has heard these stories before, so I'm not trying to repeat, but I am going to recap this story. Lori, because I haven't done it on camera, but they called this ghost Gertrude, and Gertrude would come at night, and she'd come out of the corner, and she'd come stand by the bed, and she'd cry anytime that my aunt talked about moving. And you'd hear her crying in the walls. And so, and then there was all this poltergeist activity, and there was this and that and the other. And so, I was in my 20s, and they needed some help and live-in help for their father-in-law, stepfather-in-law. And so I came I wanted to see this activity. And so they put me into the Ghost Central, which was, of course, just fine for me. And within just days, I mean, you would see these figures come. They had a wall built up so they could get behind it to get to the pipes, and it had a big chunk of styrofoam blocking the opening. And behind the opening, when they were building in the finishing the room, there were always rocks, big rocks, and they didn't want to carry them down. And it's from the woman's ceremonies. They put them behind the wall. So guess what? You'd hear squeak at night, and here would come these black figures, shadow people, but they were from ritual. But they would come out of the wall, run out, go around the door, and you'd see them go downstairs. Well, if you were downstairs, they'd run past you, either going up the stairs, coming to my room, or zipping through the house. It was amazing. People saw them all the time, and I was like, whoa. And they were scary looking. And also, this was the time I was in my 20s. I was fascinated with all this, but I wanted to get over my jump scare thing. But believe me, after living in that house, that was it. I ain't been scared since, because there was plenty to scare you. So I would be in there just a few days in. My cousin, there was like two little bed things, you know. One of my cousins that lived there um, was visiting me, and blah, 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 and then they went off to their room. And I was laying there trying to get to sleep. It was a very uncomfortable house, just very uncomfortable. And it was an old attic, so it was uncomfortable. Even though it was made to look like a room, it was not the best hotel. So well, I was trying to go to sleep, and I turned over, and there was this large Himalayan cat, which I'm crazy about cats. Well, there's this large Himalayan cat with its neck turned. You could tell it was dead. Its head was broken. I mean, its neck was broken. It freaked, I thought calmly, I watched it, and it was solid looking. And after about 3 minutes, I got up. This is before cell phones. Now I'd be going. But I went over to touch it, and it just dissipated. Then, the day or two after that, I got to meet Gertrude. I was laying in bed, and I'm a night owl. So, I have insomnia. So, I was trying to get to sleep and all that stuff. And the corner to the left of the bed in front, it was kind of a strange shaped room. It was kind of like an octagon shaped, barn shaped ceiling. And in the corner got dark. Then it got darker. And then it began to pulse. And then out of that darkness came this woman. And her face was smudged out. And she had long, black, shiny hair and a big braid. It really looked like a Native American hair, just black and shiny. Beautiful hair. But she had it in a braid, but she was wearing this really strange, dowdy, beige dress. And it looked sort of modern, I mean, it looked like this was the 80s, so it looked like something possibly that could have been from the 60s or 70s when women I knew were complaining you couldn't get a decent dress made anymore or find a decent dress, which was true, because everything was made to be skimpy and, quick made and but this looked like something from the 60s or dowdy from the 70s. We had a lot of clown clothes in the 70s. Take a word for it. I had to wear a few items like that. But she would come and cross her hands and stand at the foot of your bed. And if you told her to go away, she'd go away. Now she'd come back in a few days. So later on, I realized after I got older and more seasoned and understood, she was a fetch. She was a spirit that had been used in ceremony to go get information. So she would come to you waiting for you to tell her something. That woman had left her circle running, her spirits, her fetches, she just left them there. And they were still functioning. And it was very exciting living there, very scary. One time I was going up the steps after having to come in real late, and there was a cloud of this blackish, I know what it is now, ectoplasm, but these shadow people are made out of ectoplasm, electromagnetic, goop that we have. But it's so old, or it's so degraded, or it's not feeding off of fresh energy, so it's dark. It looks almost like smoke, or they can look like gauzy fabric and stuff. Very strange. Sometimes they'll look like ribbons of fabric. And Teal Gray had that. Her and her daughter. Her daughter, who is not into any of this stuff, saw this black ribbon of fabric. It looked like, and it appeared in the room, and it zipped under the furniture, and they were looking for it. And I said that was ectoplasm. So there was this cloud of stuff, and I had to get through it to go to my room. And that night, I was in there doing something, and I heard a man's voice, say, "Get your striped suit and your black shoes." And I only used those for funerals because we had a lot of people dying back then. And actually, that month, we had two uncles who died. So I went down and said, "I just heard this." They said, "Get my suit out, my shoes." I said, "I think someone's going to die." About 3 days later, one of my uncles, who had been sick, but we didn't think he was that close to death, and then another one had died from stress of his son being murdered. So, and what the cloud thing that I ran into on these steps that night, I didn't know at that time. My next to the eldest brother was in having an emergency, had to go to the emergency room, and was having surgery because he was eating a lot of fish that he would catch, and he had bones and that he had swallowed in his organs, and so they had to go in and remove that. So it was very much like omens, and strange things would happen. So one time I was going down the hallway, and there was a mirror across from the kitchen, and I was carrying laundry. It's in the daytime. Nobody else was there, and something caught my attention in the mirror on the wall to the left in the living room. And I could see this dead woman in a yellow gown sitting there with her head up, dead, very disheveled, in the kitchen doorway. Now, if you turned to look in the doorway, she wasn't there. But if you looked in the mirror, there she was. And at that time, I drew a picture of her, and my aunt identified it as my great grandmother. And something I didn't know about that, because she was wearing a yellow robe. And my grandmother had a yellow robe as well when she was buried. And I was like, but it didn't really look like her. And they said, no. Said, your great grandmother, Evie, and your grandmother, my granny, Laura, back in 1900 or somewhere, let's see, somewhere around when my grandmother was getting ready to get married, they'd already had a lot of death. So they knew to be prepared. In the Victorian era, you prepared for death. And they both had these silk yellow robes made for them, for each one of them. They put them in boxes. When her mother died in 1917, she was buried in that yellow robe. When my grandmother was buried in 1976, she was buried in her robe. But the one it looked like from pictures was my great grandmother. So it was a very strange house. There was you would see doppelgangers, of people who lived there but they weren't there. Doors would lock on their own. We got locked out quite a few times with a stick being put in the doorways and stuff. It was great. Not easy to get in, but it was great because my aunt would just sweat bullets. She'd be like, "Oh, what am I going to do?" And every time she'd try to sell that house, everything would go wrong. And but it went on for quite a little ways. And then when I was there with her daughter, they're all gone now, but it's strange. But her daughter was real ghost crazy. So she was there. We were recording ghosts, and she was staying there to watch the ghosts and see if we could see them. And at the foot of the steps that went up to my room, I mean, we'd been there before where you could hear someone bum 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 run up the steps and go up stairs to my room where I slept. And one time I was there by myself and I heard they ran. I was taking a shower, opened the door after I'd taken a shower, opened the bathroom door. Something was standing there, turned, ran down the hallway like they did. And I heard it run up the steps into my bedroom. And I go, oh, great. And we'd be sitting downstairs and you could hear people walking up there and there would be nobody else. So my cousin was there. She put a recorder next at the foot of the steps where you go up to my room. And her name was Judy. So we recorded it. We walked up for a few minutes. We do this, in cemeteries, stuff like that, ghost hunting. And she went and got back, picked it back up, and we turned it on, and it went. Her name was Judy. It was going Judy, Judy, and that was the last time she wanted to record a ghost. And that night, she was sleeping in her mama's room. She didn't want to sleep alone, so there was a dresser between the bed, and I made me a little pallet between it on the floor. And she went to sleep. And I'm laying there, and in the dark, you see this cutout of a man with a derby hat come to the foot of where I was, and the bed was here, the dresser was here, so there was like, a space up above me where, above the mattress. And I just felt like someone gave me anesthesia. And out of the center of this silhouette, it just went, came out, this gob came out from the center, and it covered the space between, covering me between the bed and the mattress and the dresser. And it looked like gray jello with marmalade scratches. It was real strange. And then you could see out of it, it looked like this face pushing through it came and was trying to push into my face. And when it would, I would just see gray. And I just felt like I'd been given a drug. I couldn't move. I said, Judy, oh, Judy. And I said, something's in here, and I can't move. And she woke up and looked over, and she couldn't see it. But where it was moving against the bed, the blanket was doing rippling. And she screamed this high-pitched thing, and it backed off and went away. And I said, well, I think my time here is done. And, they always try to sell a house, try to get away from it. They just finally let it go back to the bank. They couldn't sell it for a good reason. And not too long after, when they moved, my aunt died. She never did get too far from the ghost. The ghost didn't want her to leave, so She never got to. She didn't get too far away. But that was my experience around, my family were fascinated with those things, but they didn't really want to admit it. If you were fascinated with it, then they would think you were weird. But here they were, and I'm like, listen, y'all are y'all make me look like a lightweight. You like all this spooky stuff. So, I come by it honest, really. And I am going to show you a few little items that I have in my collection. My bone collection. Things that mean a lot to me, that are strange, that nobody else in my family would want them. Now, but I adore them. And I'm going to the first thing I will do, will talk about my haunted quilt. Now, did you ever think a quilt could be haunted? No. And I will tell you something else too. This house, of course, I like haunted houses. They're much better on the rent, everything. And they have charm. But this room, the corner behind me, I've cleansed this house and everything, It's still painted, but it's the nicer ones are here. Not what was here when I moved in. And it was not the kind of place you want to sleep and close your eyes for very long. Because there was this guy who died a few houses back from this house, apparently not long before we moved into it. And he had died in his place and laid there for 6 weeks before anyone found him. Well, his spirit just moved into this one. I had no clue. So we moved in, and it was funky, a little interesting, and I was painting and getting it all pretty and light, and what you do with a ghost house, if you like ghosts and hauntings and things like that, you let it be. You only do something if it really calls for it, and it called for it, because excuse my hiccups. But at night, when I'd be there trying to go to sleep, of course, being a little psychic, dropped on my head, talked to the dead. There was this youngish, kind of looking, in his 20s, 30s kind of figure, but he had real curly hair, really. You couldn't see very much of him, but he would stand by my side of the bed. And he'd be rubbing his hands like he was stressing. Like sometimes people who are mentally challenged or really worried, he was really wringing his hands. And he would sit there and you'd hear, he was mumbling. And I thought, okay, we'll see what this is. And I finally, I started going, now, listen, if you're, I know this is a new place for us, but we can coexist as long as it's, everyone, you're nice, and we'll be nice. But, I said if it's strange, you'll have to go elsewhere. Well, a couple of nights of this, and then I'm sitting there watching him one night. I thought, because what else are you gonna do, And because he would do it quite often, and then it just like the picture of his face, he was just this brown, leathery brown, which anyone who's ever seen bodies, after a while, they turn this brownish color because we really are made of a lot of dirt, minerals, and material. We really do turn back into dirt. But he looked like beef jerky, that color, and his eyes were real. The whites of his eyes were real white, and he just kind of like slow motion, just kind of and stretched. It was like the image of him just stretched like it was being pulled, and he touched me, and it felt like it kind of felt like a big silk glove with bones in it, and it touched me, and I said, "All right, Mister, the gig is up. You're out of here." I got up and I cleansed that house. He's never been here again. But we do have something that happens with this corner. I have kitty cats, and there's two of them who they will come in and talk to whatever's in that corner. They will get up on this furniture, get up and talk to whatever's in the corner. So, and it's not the only the other things in here that are kind of haunted. I mean, this bedroom. I mean, this is an 81, 82-year-old house, and we know a little bit about some of the people who lived here. But this room, the corner over there and over here, there's just something about them. So the cats will come in and stand up and talk to whatever's there, and I go, whatever. My aura is my electrical system. I have a kind of a scanning process, and if it's something that doesn't need to be around me, it lets me know. So when I've looked at any of it, it's fine. It's just old energy. Now, so while we're filming, if you ever see anything weird in this corner, that's the first show I did. Baron Booth and Teal Gray both saw something happening, and they were going that corner. And I'm like, you have no idea. Oh, no idea. But what I will talk about tonight, um, I will share some of my things I've had a long time, some newer acquisitions, but I want to stretch them out. Now, my mom, back in the 70s, or like 72, 73, somewhere around there, my father's mother, who was not a generous person, but there was something she did love, but she didn't want it anymore. So she gave my mother a bunch of old quilts and things that were family heirlooms. And there was one that my grandmother, she loved. Grandma Fultz. Grandma. The one I'm going to do the cooking show about. This quilt was made in 1839. In 1939, she relined the back of it, took it to a county fair kind of thing, and won an award in 1939. And so this is like, what, 185 years old? And it was made by, I've got to research who it's made by. But she didn't give us any of the history except that it was done by someone in the family, 1839. And she would just go, it has this beautiful lace, as you'll see in just a moment. And she would just, she could sew. She was really good seamstress. And she would really thought this lace was just beautiful, and it is. To think that all of this was hand knit. Now, I'll show you what I can of it. Let's see. It's kind of this, you know. Um, it's a crazy quilt, and there are elements of it, you know, it's all embroidered, and it has potato bugs and spider webs and little edgings, little flowers, little cornflowers, potato bugs. There's 185-year-old brocades and stuff like this. And I'm trying to figure out how to show you the best way to look at it. But I mean, I can't show the whole thing. But I was crazy for this. I'm the only one in my family that, besides my mother, that was crazy for it. Now, you see this lace, because it's going to be in the story. This is the lace my grandmother had a fit over, because it's all handmade. Now, she had fixed it in 39, and it had won the award. She kept it, loved it, but she wasn't really sentimental about very many things. So for her to be this, if you see it, all right, and that's the beginning of it. But look at the lace; it is sewed on. I'm going to tell you this story because my mommy kept it, but nobody ever fooled with it. Nobody ever got it out to look at it. Now, see, this red part is the lining my grandmother put on and put it for 1939 and won her award. She was very proud of this. And so, this quilt, I went nuts for it. And they never did spread it out all the way so we could look at it, and I was like, because I was like, I secretly always wanted to be a sewer, or, a tailor or a customer, and all of the handwork on it. This thing is covered in embroidery. Covered. So my mother put it in a cedar chest. And, I think she took it out once in the 50 or so years that she owned it. And so I don't ask for things very much, in life. I'm like, if someone wants me to have something, I'll have it. If not, I don't go, when you die, can I have this? But I did say to my mother, I said, when you're not using this anymore, think of me. Because I'm like, I love it. And I'm the only one in my family who has any connection to it for some reason. And, excuse me. So, the last time I looked at it before my mother gave it to me, just a little bit before she went into assisted living. And, the lace was totally undone, or was coming undone all the way around the quilt. It was just falling off. It was not attached. My mother had, when she was young, she had polio. Her and her sister had gotten polio and somehow gotten over it. But my mother had tremors. She couldn't sew. And she never sewed, anything like that. So the thing was, I was going to get the quilt. She would let me have the quilt when she was done with it. And I would restore it and do whatever. And then I would leave it to whoever in the family. One of my nieces, I'm sure. And the lace was coming off. So I was planning on, when I get it, I will restore it. So when my mother one day, before she went into the facility, called me over, handed me this bag. This bag had the quilt in it, and it was in the state I'd seen it before. Now my mama couldn't sew, so there were no repairs made on it, nothing to get it in shape or whatever. That was going to be my journey. So I brought it home, and after my mother died, I'd put it away when I came home. I didn't know what to do with it yet because I'm getting ready to, at some point in this room, I'm going to make it one of the bigger walls. I'm going to display it. I'm going to put it in a plexiglass and cedar, frame. So, after my mother had given it to me, I brought it home and I put it away until I could figure out what to do. So last year, my cousin who's here, I went over to visit with her because her boyfriend was out of town or whatever, and we were watching, Wednesday and all that stuff, the TV show. And I took it over and I said, I want you to look at this. I haven't ever got to really spread it out and see the whole thing. And, like I said at my mama's, you pick it up and it was starting to fall apart. So we stretched it out and it was just beautiful. We were looking at everything and then I realized later, I thought, something's odd, something's different. All of the lace was reattached to the quilt. I know my mama didn't do it. She didn't have somebody to do it. Didn't have anybody who could do that kind of thing. And it was done beautifully. And I thought, well, we won't question that too often. But when we're looking at it, my cousin is very sensitive to ghosts. She's very, she gets real spooked out by them, kind of. But she's very sensitive. She hears voices, like I do. Not voices going, knock off for 7-Eleven. But, when they tell her, things that are about to happen. So, that kind of thing. It's very psychic. So we folded up, put it in. We admired it, oohed and awed, put it back in the bag. And we're sitting there, we're watching the movie, and this really weird noise comes out of her hallway. We're sitting pretty close to it. I mean, there wasn't anywhere for something to hide, but it sounded kind of like somebody on the inside of a harpsichord, going, and doing this weird noise. And she goes, "What's that?" And I said, "I don't know." And we had we kept having these weird noises. So we watched the movie, and we're sitting there chit-chatting and talking about that. And then I went, "Oh." And she went, "What?" I said, "Oh. It's the spirits associated with the quilt." And then you could feel the atmosphere change. So it was like, yes, kind of thing. So the bag is sitting by her foot. Now she thought this quilt was beautiful and everything else, but when I said that, she just kept this very dead-eyed look at me, and she took her foot and she slid the quilt over to me, and she goes, I said, "I think I'll leave it with you." And I slid it back. And she slid it back to me going, "I think you'll be taking this home." And so we did that for a few minutes. It was hysterical. She was terrified of it. And so I brought it home. I thought it was so great. And one of the things that spirits do here is they will knock. When they let you know something. My haunted dolls have knocked on the door when it's too cold in the storeroom they were in. Get me out of here. Put me in the warm room. So I brought it home and folded it up neatly, put it back in its bag, and put in the room I was going to, and then on my bedroom door, well, the door was open. Knock, knock, knock. And I was like, all right. I know that it's haunted. I know that you're proud. And it felt like a spirit attached to it that was just so glad that it was going to be loved. It wasn't anything scary, but it was so funny because my cousin about had a cow. It was so funny. Um, and I couldn't. It looked like a scripted movie scene because she was like, no, and just slid it over to me. It was funny. But let me take a little sip of my iced tea. All right. But that's my haunted quilt story, and I'm sticking to it. It was very funny. Um, and my cousin, she's like, don't bring it back over. She's not looking forward to that. Now, my next thing. Oh, in the 80s, probably 85, 86. Well, 85. My mom and I, we love to go to yard sales. And so in 85, we were in Chattanooga, and there was a little yard sale at a place a friend of ours used to live. And so it had changed hands, but we wanted to go see this yard sale. We stopped, and you never know what you're going to find, And here I am, I'm, 20, 21, 22, And so, but I've been obsessed with antiques the moment I came out of the Easy Bake Oven. I love an antique. But of course, a spooky antique doesn't hurt. So, I was at this yard sale, and let's see. This is an 1890s Art Nouveau urn. It is an urn that ashes were put into. It is a ladylike urn. It has vines and birds and a very rare item and an urn. So, me being the little weirdo that I am, I see it and I go pick it up, and I just can't believe this. I mean, I'm an Art Nouveau freak. Look at this. All this detail, all the birds, the grapes, I don't know how much you can see, but it's beautiful on a marble base. So somebody at some point was living in this, and someone took and sprinkled them somewhere, and then somehow along the long and winding road, this ended up at a yard sale. So I pick it up, and something that has never happened since, before or since, because I was very shy back then, and if somebody accosted me, or came up and I would have scuttered away like a little crab. I was very shy. I'm holding this. I picked it up, and this very heavy-set lady who really outweighed me, muscle big, came up and grabbed it in my hands and says, I saw it first. Now, if it had been something else, I might have gone, oh, well, sure, this is the South. I believe in being a gentleman, my dear. You can have it. But that was not the case this day. I was like, you may have seen it first, but I picked it up first. I got to it first. So I was holding on to that with my claws. And guess what? Do you think she got it? No! It's mine! And it was only $25. And it's haunted, but a very sweet lady kind of element was with it for a long time. And now the energy has moved on. So if I had my wishes and druthers, I would silver plate it and use it, but make it, beautiful vase to have out. But I may use it for my own crypt when I'm turned into a pile of dust because it's just so beautiful. But her spirit has moved on because this is from the 1890s. She's that spirit way went, but for a while it was kind of a little haunted, and it's still interesting. It has an interesting character, but that's how weird things come to me. Uh, that you know, not something very typical, not something that you would expect, and a lot of people wouldn't know what it is. But like I said, when this woman grabbed that thing out of my hand, I thought, it is we're about to roll. I wasn't gonna let go of it. I thought she might beat me with it, but she's not gonna get this thing. So 40 something years later, it sits in my parlor. Now, let me see. I have a haunted mirror. I have two haunted mirrors, but I know of three. My cousin has one that's so haunted she can't put it in her guest room. It creeps people out. Well, actually, I can say. Let me see. One, two, three, four. I know of four haunted mirrors. She has a fireplace mantle that had a mirror, but it's a very sweet lady haunts it. I have two mirrors. One in my living room that is haunted by a lady with black hair, and you'll see that hair sticking up sometimes. Like she's too short to look out. But we put little vases on the mirror. It's very strange, very pretty thing. I can't bring it in here because it's too heavy to haul up. But someday I'll show you what it looks like. I'll get some pictures and show y'all. But the vases will they'll be we usually put three little vases that I gave my mother in 1980 from Germany, and when I had to go on a music tour with my school, and there'll be one in the center and two on the ends. Well, they'll always turn. The one in the center will stay still, and the other ones will twist and turn, and they'll turn, or they'll all turn, or one will turn another way, and it's really, and the spirit seems to have fun with that. So it's very funny. But we'll go by and see the little vases turn, and sometimes I want to see if I can film it happening because it's very subtle, but they'll just turn on their own. So every week you have to go in and turn them back. And then I have another one that came from an old house that I don't put it out because the guy who died, the person who inherited his things, he had gorgeous antiques, gorgeous. But the person who inherited them put all of his beautiful beautiful things in the basement, and all of it was rotting. And this mirror came from that, and he was not happy that his worldly goods were not being treated with the respect he thought they should be. So this mirror, if you have it out, you can see his image in it, but he's usually in the back, and he's just, spirits usually look like people or old photographs. They don't usually look bad. He looks kind of scary, he looks dead. He's got this hair that's sticking up everywhere, and you can't see his face, and he's kind of gray, and but because the mirror was propping up a door in the basement where it had been set before they cleaned it out. And I mean, seriously, if you went in there, it looked like something from Great Expectations. There was this whole incredible bedroom set of marble top furniture, like the one behind me, except with marble top. And it was all rotting and falling in. There was a huge bed. It was all collapsing, and everything you touch would just crumble. And all these beautiful linens and brocade um, quilts and coverlets and everything was just rotten. He had let it spoil, and the owner said, "I didn't realize it was this bad," because he was in his 80s when this was all going on. So the person who had been there, he could see himself in the mirror. So I have the mirror, but I ain't putting it in a room where I have to look at it, because you'll see him kind of creeping around, trying to look out at you. And I'm like, not happening, because I want to sleep. I don't want to have that looking at me. But he was glad I took it and gave it a home, because they were getting rid of everything that was still livable. But I mean, seriously, I'd never seen so much beautiful East Lake 1880s, 1890s type furniture just crumbling in. And he's like, I didn't realize. He thought it would be safe in the basement, and it's like, he was a little wrong. But I have that mirror, and someday I will bring it out and let you see it, and see if we can see anything. I'll do that for one of my shows. Now, last show I had, I think, or my first show, I showed one of my dolls. I'll show you a couple of my dolls. This one. Now, this is, if you know what a spiritualist is, I do a lot of spiritualism. I do the spiritualist movement in the 1800s, from the 1830s on up, is where we get the table tipping, the Ouija boards, the trumpets, listening to spirit trumpets, that you would put the trumpet to your ear and the spirit would talk to you, or the spirit would lift the trumpet and bring it to you and speak to you. This is before phones, so there would be tambourines and drums and trumpets. I have a trumpet, a spirit trumpet that I like. And the spiritualist movement brought us a lot of what we know of, the Ouija, like I said, the Ouija board seances, and all of that. The tools they created, we are still familiar with some aspect of it. Now, during the days in the hundreds and early 1900s in the heyday of it before it faded out. Excuse my hiccup. Um, Spiritualists were serious with these things. They would have spirit cabinets where it was like a deprivation thing, and the psychic would sit in the cabinet and communicate with the people in the room, or there were just weird things, like weird disembodied faces or hands would look out through the curtains, or you would have bowls of wax, and you would see hands pressed into the wax. You would have, there were some things that were people would use to be fake, and then there were some things that were real. The slate could be something that could be either. There were people who were able to fake it, and then there were some, people the spirits could write. Um, as with anything, you're always going to get somebody who's going to take it and go crazy with it. But the spiritualists have a lot of tools that I admire and use in like automatic writing. I have made my own spirit boards and communication devices, which are quite unique. We'll be covering those later. When I get them all ready, I'll do a little seance and show you how it's done. Because it's like a DJ. I have all these boards, and they work for different things, and different types of death, and different circumstances, and chemicals, and directions, and everything. So it's very unique. We'll be doing those later on down the line. But one of the spiritualist things, now spiritualism, they believed in using spirit guides, and a lot of times they would be, Native American. I have some Native American in me, so I get drawn to a lot of these things. This is a wax head figure. I call him Chief. And they had a lot of love for the Native American guides. So this is a wax doll. Each hair has been applied by hand. And as spiritualists use this to watch over their seances. And now he lives with me. Now he has a spirit, and very unique. Actually, the person with the mullet that from the place I used to work, he was when I was leaving, I had all my dolls there, and he was like, "I want that one." Like I wasn't, I had no choice but to give it to him, and I'm like, no, I can't. They're like my children, and this one is very interesting, very wise energy, but he watches. And the person that worked in there also was scared of my dolls. And this one and one named Pansy were on the panels, because Pansy, I had a cabinet I had them in, but she didn't want to be in the cabinet. So Chief and Pansy were both uh, hanging on the wall, and she'd cover was the sheet, and I'd come in, and at first I thought, "Don't you touch my dolls," and then the dolls thought it was kind of funny, so I kind of like, okie dokie. She was probably never happier than when I left and took my dolls, because she thought they were scary, and I love them. I think they're a hoot. Now, this is one, she's very shy, but this is a 1920s bisque doll, and sometimes her little face will change, but her name is Evangeline. Very shy. There's another one that's with us that's a sister to her. That's a tin doll, but they're both. The other one has to be repaired, so her face is peeling, and she does not like to be seen. So this one and hers, usually I set them together. They're very shy, very sweet. But the other one, because she doesn't like to have her face showing, she will turn, and no matter what you do, the next day she'll kind of be turned where you can't see her full front. And this one, Evangeline, there's Ava and Evangeline and um, Mandy and Pansy and Lily. Now, Lily is a very large 1950s doll that watches over the other dolls, and people see her eyes move. So, but this is Evangeline. I think she's quite beautiful and quite unique hands, paper mache hands and body, and her little face is bisque. But these are examples of vessels. At some point, someone put so much energy and life force into them that they got a consciousness. It's not exactly like she doesn't have a spirit, but she has a consciousness that the child who loved her way back when, in 1920s, she just has an intelligence. And so I rescue these kind of babies, and doesn't matter if they're damaged, doesn't matter what condition they're in. If they have the life force and I can find it and feel it, they're getting saved. Thank you, Evangeline. And the chief, like I said, a lot of people really get affected by him. They'll feel his presence. And like I said, the other person, the mullet in the mist, was like, I want him. And I was like, I'm sorry, it's just not happening. And some of my other ones, I have Lizzie. I've been offered some money for for that baby, for all of them, but for that baby, and I'm like, no, those are like my children. If I felt like I couldn't give them a good home or give them the atmosphere that they need to be in, um, then I would make sure they had a better home. Or when I'm starting to go into the next world, then somebody else can be a caretaker. But until then, I'm it, and they're stuck right now with me. But I try to make them happy because they are consciousness. Not You don't always get a ghost or a spirit with a haunted doll, but if it has enough consciousness, it's thinking, it's functioning, and they can do some pretty interesting things. So, but what I like with these is I like to see how they move around on their own because they'll shift, and the ones that are shy will make sure they're hiding back a little more, and the ones that are more forward will push their way to the front or will defend, kind of like shade, gi- give a place for the other ones who are shy to hide, kind of thing. So it's very interesting, little things like that. Now, of course, I collect haunted dolls, but not every doll is haunted. And I have some that the doll itself is haunted. It doesn't have eyes yet, but they don't need eyes to see. They see with their third eye if they have enough consciousness. So, because when you put your consciousness into them, then they have a little bit of your essence. So then they have their own third eye, and then it develops. It they have the basics, and then they figure out what to do to function, survive. And I've seen modern dolls that have essence to them that function. I've only seen a few that is like nope, 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 not taken home, nope, 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 nope. Not because of fear, but because of do I really want to have something that I have to sleep with one eye open? I have to seal in. Now I have two items I have to keep sealed, and those are books, and they were used for very bad things apparently. And one of them was from a friend that he was so I loved him to death, but he was weird. You think I'm weird? He was weird. He makes me look like I should be sitting sipping wine with nuns. He had a weird life, but he had these books he would collect, and he had jars full of rat heads and things and he was very handsome, very intelligent. But he was fascinated with funky stuff, and I can't even explain without no, I just can't explain. But he had these books. He had one book that I have that it was used in ceremony, but it was used in a way where it still functions as a doorway. So if you read the book, this woman will appear, kind of like the fetch, like from my aunt's house. So, and she's not it's like, and it's your life. It's not something you want, you know, to happen. So to keep her from, she's not able to come out of the energy. What happens is when you're looking and reading, it sets off, and then it triggers your aura, triggers her aura, like a spider, feels the little web, ding, 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 and then it's like, oh, can I be a service, and so you start to see her, or she starts approaching you, kind of thing at night, and it's like, nope, and don't need that, so I sealed the book. I keep it sealed. I have it. I don't know what to do with it. I'm not going to burn it and release it. Um, I don't want to give it to someone for just this feeling of nope, nope, nope. So it's sitting. So one day I may do a show on that. Because there's just something, I think we could be able to measure it, put it in a safe circle kind of energy thing, and explore it energy wise to a point, but I think we would be able to gauge some energy off of that one. Then the next one is an extremely rare book. Um, the only copy I've seen of it is over $600. But there was a witch named Sybil Lake. But she was a hoot. But she would do books and not always think about it too far ahead, what it could cause. And she did a book called Drawing Out the Devils. Well, it really has a lot of things that demonologists and people like that could use in it. It really has exorcisms and callings, and I mean, there's things in it. From what I've looked at it, I kind of peeked at it one time. But again, I got this book. I don't even remember how I got the book. But then I got the book, and you start to read it, and again, was it was used in ceremony to bring forth some things that aren't healthy, and they're just beyond that veil. And so when you activate it by looking at it, then you have an interaction with that energy. And it's another one. It's like, ooh, no, 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 because it would be unhealthy for your health. I mean, it's a lot of people who do some of the magic and stuff that involved with that kind of book. I mean, all the ones I knew that were doing this darker kind of stuff, that's your choice. But all of them died from leukemia and cancer. They were consumed because that energy will just consume you. So I have that sealed. It's hidden somewhere very, very carefully. Again, I think it could be safely put into a circle and investigated with equipment, but only to a certain extent because it is unhealthy. So after having those two things fall into my hands, and I think they did because so that I could keep them contained. Um, I don't necessarily go for the scary dolls. Not that I haven't had my experiences with the scary dolls, but I don't really. The ones that I have are so interesting and very delightful. Personalities and people get to experience with them. That I like that. I like people being able to look beyond what they're thinking or what they're seeing with it. And I don't know. It's just people love my haunted dolls, and actually, I will be taking a few into my store this weekend on Saturday and Sunday. But I'll bring them back home. They don't like to be down there by themselves too much for certain reasons, because of the temperatures, and there's no way for me to keep the climate in the store the way I would want to. Because when they're made out of paper mache and wax and leather and things like that, they're affected by temperature changes and moisture. So we aren't just gonna, you know, go through too much of that. But I do love to share them with the world. And I need to make like a little virtual thing where you can go in and see all of them and see, because like the one Lizzie, that doll talks to you, through um, telepathy, and not just with feeling and emotion, but you hear her. I've heard her before, and I'm quite aware when she's not happy, or when she's um, wanting something. And but a very happy little spirit, very sweet. Uh, that to me, it's I have an interesting collection. I am going to get more. I do have some other ones. They're just I've got to put them to bodies and hands and feet and it all that, and it all takes time and takes money, and also finding the right vibration to match the body with the head, because or with the essence. You don't want to have something that will conflict. You know, sometimes it's better just to get a blank body almost to put them on, because they will superimpose who they are into it. But if you have a body of someone that was uh, that had a life force or consciousness, then the body has a consciousness still attached to it. The head you're going to apply has a consciousness, and you put them together, there can be a conflict. So you have to be very aware. You know, and my point of doing that is just to make them where they can live and be seen and be whole again. Um, a lot of them, start off just from a lot of Victorian children only got one toy sometimes. And if they got a doll, if something happened to that doll, that was it. There was no other doll. There was, if you had a toy and the toy broke, there was no other toy. It's not like now where the parents just go, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. They gave it to you. If you couldn't watch it, couldn't take care of it, then that was, they would just go, well, you couldn't take care of it. Uh, but also, they didn't, children were looked at so differently than now that, a lot of people had big families so they could have the children help work the farm, help take care of the other children. They weren't looked at like, oh, honey, you have needs. Oh, here, let me help you with your development. Let me help you with your tour. You know, this will help you with nurturing. Or, no. It's like you were pulled up by your hair like a turnip. And, like a turnip pulled out of the ground. So these dolls and these toys, sometimes these were their only toys. They would be their only friend in some cases, because children were always meant to be talked to or looked at. They were seen but not heard, or vice versa. Seen or heard. Childhood was a different thing back then. And Christmas and stuff, we would think, oh, a Victorian Christmas, oh, they had to have wonderful things, and I'm sure there were quite a few, but the majority of people, if you couldn't make it, you just couldn't buy it, and so you got more things like, a rag doll, or things you could make, but so a doll, there were millions of them made, but not all of them are haunted. Not all of them were loved. A lot of times people would get these dolls and just look at them and display them, but if they were considered a fine item, a lot of times you couldn't play with them because there are dolls like Bruce and June, Jamos, and things like that. That were investments when they were bought. And adults would buy the really expensive ones and put them in their parlor as, a display of wealth, not as a play toy. And then children who did have these toys as playthings. The way you played with them was differently. The way you had to take care of them was differently. And um, I have China had dolls that they've been broken for over 100 years, and people would throw them in the privy in the outhouse before they filled in the outhouse, or they were thrown away if they were broken, and they still have some kind of spark to them. So you have to clean them up and restore them, and I will be doing restoration of some that are very. I wouldn't be able. Another good thing about taking damaged dolls is that I can afford those. I can't afford a $4,000 China doll or a $4,000 bisque doll or wax. But all the dolls that come to me have come to me in such unusual ways. I shouldn't have been able to get them. Lizzie came to me in a way that I shouldn't have been able to get Lizzie, and I needed Lizzie because I was doing a book with a cover, and I needed this particular look, and I found it, and it was Lizzie because she's missing half of her face. Well, that doll came to me out of the mist in a way, and magnetized it, and it was very interesting. And I find they come to me, they find me. If I need them and I need to really look at it, then they find me. Um, and I take it very seriously because they are metaphysical tools. Sometimes they are metaphysical relics. They are sometimes spiritual relics. Some of them do have spirit and consciousness to them and can think and talk and just as well as we think, or sometimes in a different way. Um, but they're fascinating kind of thing to me too. Like they're little people, and there was a ghost story I remember years ago. These people had bought a very rare doll, and they had it displayed in their house, and it would keep moving on its own, and they didn't know what to think about it, and it appeared to be kind of haunted. Well, one day, the lady of the house, they had a big Victorian house, and these dolls were displayed in a like a guest room. And she was in one of the other guest rooms making the bed, and this little girl with a big bow in her hair and a little pink dress and was carrying the doll and walked past the door. There was no little girl in the house. That was who was with the doll, and it kept moving and playing with the doll. And because they were Christian, they were freaked out over that. And they didn't care that it was a rare doll. They didn't care that there was a little spirit attached to it. They took the doll to the dump. And I thought, well, I hope the little spirit can get it out of there. But maybe she found somebody to find it. But I thought that was terrible. That little girl was still attached to her doll, and they mistreated both. Um, I would have found someone to let the little girl see if she need help if she needed to be released, or if she was still conscious, or kind of recorded or whatever. But apparently she was conscious. 'Cause she was carrying the doll and watching the woman. She walked by the door while the woman was working and let her see her carrying the doll. And I think, she thought the woman was like a mother energy because she had children, grown children. And I thought maybe she was wanting to be accepted, and instead, she was misunderstood. And they freaked out and dumped it, took it to the dump. I thought, you could have taken it to a thrift store or something, let somebody else have it, have her. So that story always made me conscious of the spirits that can be attached to the item. You good, bad, indifferent. Sometimes very innocent energy sometimes attached like that. And with dolls and with toys and with antiques, you never know. And of course, if you this this piece of furniture behind me, it's really old, and it's so old. The finish on it turned black. I mean, but it's not a black piece of furniture; it's a walnut piece of furniture. But this had a very interesting energy when I bought it, and after I bought it and fixed it up, the energy went. It was like it felt like it was safe, and it left. It was in safe hands, and it's not haunted. But I worked for months and months and months. I had to work on this for about a year just to get this dresser because I was determined to have it. It was just like I saw it and I went, oh, I gotta have it. And so it's been with me 25 years, I guess. And I've known people who've bought old antique beds, and they can be um, haunted. So you're sleeping in someone else's energy. So things like that you need to kind of cleanse a little before. Smudge it, wipe it down with a little vinegar water, a little water, a little salt, little sage, a little a little bit of spirits of ill will until it cannot well across this line. You know, I think because I have an antique bed, but I never had that problem. But I have known of people. I remember old stories of people that would try to go to sleep in these old haunted beds, and the beds would jump or make noise or slide, and so it is possible. So anything antique, and not everything is haunted, but it's much easier to find a antique than it is something new. Now, I do have newer items that are um, haunted. I have dolls from the '60s that are haunted, even Barbies. But I do know of people who've had furniture, and now the phenomena of going to thrift stores. People when people die, a lot of people will go. I mean, they'll take the people's belongings and put them in the thrift store. So sometimes those people weren't quite let go of their stuff. So you might sometimes get to experience something interesting from that, or old wedding dresses, or people used to be buried in their wedding dresses, so they weren't always necessarily ready to let them go, if you know what I mean. But I've picked up some there, and I have come across furniture that I wanted so bad, but there was something so wrong with the energy that I would have to go, nope, nope, can't do it. And there was this one doll I did by one of my old friends that I lived in a house with. There was this doll. It was so scary looking. And it wasn't scary like somebody made a scary doll. It was something about this doll. And it had been innocent looking at one time, but you could tell there was something with it. and these people had a great story with it. The woman had bought these dolls like for repair parts, and she had bought them at a flea market. Took them home and put some of the stuff. She had like a work barn for a she cave, and so she put them in the storage part up above, and took one of the dolls inside with her, and it kept making little noises and doing weird things. And so she was, after a little while, she's like, maybe not so much. And so she took it. She was getting creeped out, and so she thought her husband was asleep. She thought, I'll just take it and put it with the other dolls that I bought. And she's like, I don't want this in my house. So she took it, and there was like a little, loft. And so she climbed up the loft with this doll in her arms, and she heard something in up in the loft. And she got up on the ladder and was getting ready to take this doll to put it back in that box, big cardboard box. And she said, I kept hearing something shuffling around, like it, because there was like a lot of tissue paper or, something like Excelsior and stuff in it that was making noise. And so when she stuck her head up there to do it, she said, the box moved, opened a little, and you could hear like whispering in the box, like, here she comes. And she threw that doll at the box, didn't put it in the box. She screamed and ran into the house, and she put them on line and was going, I want them out of my house. I don't want them. And so I wanted this one. And Judith, who was looking at it, who normally likes spooky things, normally liked dolls, normally she collected dolls, and normally would be like, oh yeah. She's like, hell no, not happening. That is not coming in this house. If you get that in here, I'll kill you in your sleep. She's like, no, there's something wrong with that. Don't. And somebody else wanted, I think, for like $300 or something. And it was perfect for scary stuff. And that's the only scary one I wanted. I don't know what it was about her. But, uh, yeah, but Judith was cracking me up. So I would, you know, when she was reading or doing something, I'd scratch around the door and go, try to figure out. Didn't work. But she's like, that ain't coming in here. Now she did have a doll someone gave her that he liked to restore dolls. And he had gotten this doll that had been, when he found it, it was at a flea market and being tortured by these people, these kids, and he took it and had it remodeled. It was a very pretty doll. Had it redone, but it had this anger from being whatever, and she was scared of it. And it didn't like me. I could tell when I go around it. You can tell, and it didn't like anybody. And that's what I've told the story of before. That we lived in this old Victorian house. In 20 years, she went in that basement twice. Well, she went once with that doll because I would hear her arguing with it, and she goes, "It hates me. It hates me. I'm trying to be nice to it. It hates me." And I'm like, "Y'all have fun," because I didn't want it over on my side. Then she put it in the basement, and I was like, "Okie dokie." Well, not long after that, she went her way. I went my way. And apparently the doll was still sitting in the basement. I'm like, it didn't like me. Now somebody else will find you, but I can't. I can't. And because she really hated me. So 3 days later, because Judith didn't drive, she didn't know. She moved off to the other end of Chattanooga, and I moved to a place that was in a middle of 100 acres in the country, and I kept all the doors locked all the time, all the even the porch things. And 3 days later, I walk out, and there's that doll sitting right there waiting for me. And I know exactly where she had been left. And she didn't like me, but she knew that I would find her a home. So she she had apported, which can happen. She had tr- transmitted herself from there to where I was. I dressed her up. I said, "Now look, I will find you a home because you don't like me. It ain't happening. We're having that conversation." So I found someone who collected haunted dolls. They wanted it, and they bought her, and I never heard anything else. And so I would say she was happy. She was okay with that transaction, but she didn't like me, and I just was like, nope, 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 sister, mister, nope, nope, nope. We ain't having it. And also, I've had haunted clothing, haunted dresses, haunted coats, things from the 1800s, hats. So it's very possible to find things that have energy, and then there's things that have consciousness, and then there's a few things that will have a spirit attached to it. And, they are out there. But it's not always necessary for you to have it or for you to have that in your home. And if you do, I think you need to be a little prepared for it because it can be very jarring. Like if you brought a piece of furniture and not a dead person is hanging out with you, or like I said when I moved in here, it was the house. And had the dead guy standing by the bed, making noise and trying to creep me out. People who've bought um, bedroom suits or furniture, and then have the person who was just not finished with it yet come in and try to tell you what to do with it, or move into an old house where they're like, "We don't want you here. This is ours." So um, you have to get yourself sensitive enough to understand what you're looking at, and if you don't understand, find somebody who do. And haunted dolls aren't for everybody, but these are the things that haunt us. And really, they're essences of us. They're little bits and pieces of humanity. And some of these pieces of humanity I look at and I feel like a caretaker. And I feel like I try to be ethical in the way I deal with it. And then there are items, it's like, no. Oh, I actually forgot one more item. Guess what I have? Now, see, I do channeling. So sometimes if you channel, it does help to have a little piece or something that the person had to connect. It makes it easier. I can do it without it, but I can do it better with it. Now, see, here's this. See this little piece of, well, fabric here. That is a piece of a morning dress worn by Mary Todd Lincoln. This came from a collection from a man who had a lifelong, well known uh, backlog of materials, of things, different stuff. But this is one of a piece of a dress that it's not the dress that Mary Todd was wearing when Lincoln was shot, but it's a dress it's a morning dress, so it's a piece of something that she wore. And what happened in this collection, this was a dress that the silk shatters, old dresses get worn down and old, and they would collect things. Well, she's famous, they had that, but so it was already in shreds, so they just cut it into little pieces, and he saved it. And then after he died, the John Latimer estate sale, I got that through that. And so I would be able to, and maybe I will do this with Lori and Kat Hobson that are out there. Next time we get together, we'll do a little seance and contact Mary Todd Lincoln. Now, what's interesting about Mary Todd Lincoln, besides the fact that she was married to Abraham Lincoln, was that she was a spiritualist. And she was a spiritualist before they moved and, to before he became president. Then when their son died while they were in office, um, she just went into mourning. She just wore black for the rest of her life. And then when Lincoln was killed, that was set in stone. And so the rest of her life, from when her child died, she only wore black, as far as I understand. And so this would have been something with that. And she was very interesting. She actually, because of her, we've had seances in the White House. Because after the child died, she would have regular seances to contact the spirit and to kind of ease her mind. Lincoln allowed some of those. He wasn't especially a believer, but he did that for her mind, for her peace of mind. And then when he died, she went, from what I remember reading, I don't think she went to the funeral. She stayed in bed. She was so traumatized. She stayed in bed. She had a psychic come and try to reach him through seance. And they would sit by her bed and try to communicate with him. And then after he died, not a few years after that, their other child, she had another son, Robert, who was older. But the one that was the brother to the one that had died, he died because she was, she went up after the first child died. She started a really, I would say, exhibited bipolar and maybe skits, but she went on spending sprees. They didn't have the money for her to spend money. He was the president, but he was getting a salary. It's not like now where you make millions. He had a salary, and when he would be out of being president, he wouldn't have that salary like that. And she was spending way, 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 way like a bipolar episode. She was spending way out of reach, and she had a lot of secret bills, and she had to her friends, said, if he gets reelected, we're safe. If not, we're ruined. Because, they would be in the poorhouse. Because she couldn't stop. And he was so pitiful as well because when they lost their son, he really couldn't let him go. It was really one of his favorite children, and he kept for nights, nights, quite a few days after he was buried. And well, he was put in a crypt. He kept going and opening and looking at him, and opening and looking at him. He just couldn't stop until, you know, time and decomposition made it where he had to. He had to let go. And he never got to really mourn. And because he was in the middle of the Civil War. And then he was killed. And then when he was killed and buried, people kept digging him up and looking at him. And there were several times, someone tried to steal the body. So they hid his body, and then when she died, they hid her body with him, and they had in a lead casket. People kept opening his casket every few years, and looking at him, and and I thought that interesting. He was looking at his son and couldn't let him go, and people couldn't let Lincoln go. And the last time is when he was moved to a new tomb, and his son Robert um, had him buried and poured concrete on it to say, people keep opening his casket and looking at him. They need to let him go. And then Lincoln haunted the White House and still haunts the White House. Um, but Mary, was a spiritualist. So she spent the rest of her life trying to contact her sons because all of her sons close to her died, and then Robert and her did not get along. And she actually was an intelligent woman. When she and Lincoln got together, I would say she was really the force behind him. He was just a country boy who was intelligent, but she was political and savvy and knew people and was from a connected people family. And people didn't like her. She was opinionated, and if somebody bothered or dared to be rude to her husband, whew, she would clean them. She would clean their plate. And until her tragedies started building up and she was having trouble with the bipolar and all this, I would say she was pretty high functioning. And then, but she had plenty of reason to have problems and to have emotional problems, chemical problems. Her sons died, her husband was murdered right next to her, and she had a premonition about him before he died and tried to keep him from going to the theater, they said. And she, very fascinating. So, but with this little piece of fabric that used to be worn by Mary Todd Lincoln, one day I will record a seance. I'll get Kat and Lori or anyone else that Kat wants to put together, and we'll do that one. And another person I know that has some fascinating memento mori and strange things like this, my friend Teal, actually has a sad piece, but it's a piece of tile from the fireplace of the Tate murders in the 60s. So I don't know that we will explore that. I've had to accidentally experience some of those spirits, and it was very interesting. But I don't think we'll be doing that one. I think that one we need to look at them and make sure they've moved on. Uh, we can call back Mary Todd and talk to her, make sure if she needs to move on or if she did. I think she has. The personality can haunt just as well as the spirit, because it's a construct of its own. So we'll look at that and see. So that may be a show, and then I would show how, if that consciousness needs to be released, how it can be done. So now we are coming to the end of our show. I hope that you enjoyed the things that haunt us on Universal Truths here with the Fat Psychic. And we'll be back. I think, I don't know if we'll be able to be here next week, but we will be back soon. And we're having to figure out getting this all done since it's all live. If anyone wants to meet me in person, uh, Friday and Saturday and Sunday, I am at Pea Ridge Flea Market, uh, Pace, Florida, about 30 minutes away from Pensacola. I'm in the Pea Ridge Flea Market, space 29, Gypsy Moon. And if you look at my Facebook, Mark Elliott Fultz, ELLIOTTFULTS, you can see my contact information, or you can message me. And if you want to meet me, but you can't be there when I'm open, just contact me, and I'm only a few minutes away from the store. I can meet you there possibly, uh, or just But when I do, very soon I'll be. As soon as I get my mean old grandma's good old cookbook done, I'll be signing those books out of my store. So I hope that you've enjoyed this show. I had a good time doing it. I'm pardon my hiccups. They're fading out. I get them every few years, and I'll have them for a week. And I've had them since Sunday. I'm ready for them to move on. So, but I hope that all of you have a good week and have a good time. And I want to say to all of you out there in the dark, good night. Good night.